My legs will not close. It is agony. The young waitress wept as she shuffled through the diner, her thighs clamped together as if every step was fresh torment. The air smelled of burnt coffee and sizzling fat. Three men with reputations that made rooms go silent sat frozen when she whispered, "I can't close my legs. The pain is too much." The bruises on her skin said what her voice could barely hold. What that mob boss did in that moment would quiet the entire city. Because this isn't just a crime story. It's what happens when the system fails, and one decision changes a woman's life forever. This story will show you that sometimes, the most unexpected people become our greatest protectors, and that true strength isn't about never falling, but about finding the courage to rise when no one else will lift you up. Now, back to our story. Christopher Giancarlo had seen enough broken men to recognize true suffering, but he was not ready for the girl who collapsed near the counter. She was maybe 22 or 23 years old. Dark hollows were pressed under her eyes, deep and bruised. Her black and white uniform was ripped near the bottom. She was missing one shoe, and the other was worn beyond repair. Strands of her light brown hair were stuck to the sweat on her neck. With every motion, her entire body seemed to cry out in protest. Giancarlo placed his espresso cup down with extreme care, his every instinct on high alert. His men, Victor and Dante, became completely motionless. The jukebox music in the corner seemed to melt away, leaving only the sound of the waitress's labored breathing and the faint sound of dishes in the kitchen. The night cook had even stopped, his spatula hanging in the air over the hot griddle. She came to a stop in the middle of the room, her legs trembling uncontrollably as her hands pressed against her lower stomach. Her face was flushed with a deep pain and something worse. It was the shame and terror that comes from a hurt that leaves no visible wound, but that everyone can feel. Giancarlo stood up slowly, keeping his hands open and his movements smooth. "You are hurt, my dear." His voice was low and quiet, all of its normal authority gone, transformed into something almost tender. The girl gave a small nod. Tears cut clean lines through the foundation she had applied to hide a mark on her cheek. It was a new bruise, not even 12 hours old, the type that would be much darker by the next day. "My landlord," she choked on the words, and it looked painful just to swallow. "Last night. He claimed the rent was overdue. He said I could pay him in other ways." The way she held herself was not out of shyness. It was from injury. It was a deep, sharp agony that made her bite down on her lip every time she shifted her weight, trying to find a way to stand that did not send fire through her body. "What is your name?" he asked her. "Lyra." She said the name as if it were a terrible secret. "Lyra Hart." He forced his way inside. "He threw me down when I tried to fight him. I fell against the bed's metal frame. Something sharp cut into me. I think I am torn open inside. I went to the hospital, but I have no insurance. They told me they could not help me with the expenses without a report from the police." Victor took a sharp breath just behind Giancarlo. Dante swore fiercely under his breath in Italian, a curse that called on saints to witness a promise of violence. Giancarlo's face grew hard and became a cold mask of purpose. It was the look he got when he was about to make a choice that would permanently alter someone's life. "You have come to the correct place, Lyra. We will take care of you. I give you my word." He walked around the counter with slow, deliberate movements, fully aware of her pain. She flinched when he got close, but she did not back away. There was nowhere else for her to go. That sad truth was plain in her eyes. He pointed to the closest booth. "Sit down very slowly. This is not the time to act tough." Lyra lowered herself onto the red seat with a sharp intake of breath that showed how much pain she was holding back. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the side of the table, breathing hard through her nose as if following instructions on how to endure pain. "I should not be here. I know what you are. The whole city knows. But I had no other choice. The police do not care about women like me. And my landlord, he has powerful friends. He warned me what would happen if I ever spoke up. Giancarlo sat down in the booth across from her. His dark blue suit was perfectly pressed, even at 3:30 in the morning. He looked ready for a business meeting or a burial. Powerful friends like who? She shook her head, the simple gesture causing her to grimace. I do not know any names. He just boasted about them. He said he had people who could make me vanish if I ever made trouble for him. He said that nobody would take the word of a waitress against a man who owned property. He told me that girls like me are disposable. That last word just hung there in the diner. Disposable. Dante stood by the front door like a statue, his arms folded as he scanned the street outside. Victor went into the kitchen and spoke quietly to the cook, who nodded and quickly disappeared into the back. The diner fell silent, except for the low hum of the cooler and Lyra's shallow breathing. Giancarlo leaned in a little closer. How long has he been doing this? For 3 months. Her voice cracked and shattered. It started after I lost my job at the big department store when it shut down. He gave me a good price on the apartment when I had nothing. He said I looked like his own daughter. I thought it was my lucky day. But then he started coming by late at night, trying my doorknob. Just checking. It got worse from there. Last night was the breaking point. I told him I was going to the police, and he laughed in my face. He said I had no evidence. He said they would all just assume I was a renter trying to get out of paying what I owed. Victor came back from the kitchen and knelt by the booth. He moved with a quiet dignity that was surprising for such a large man. I have called Dr. Ferraro. He is coming now. It will be quiet. No official papers unless you ask for them. And he will not ask any questions. Lyra's eyes went wide with panic. I cannot pay for a private doctor. I make minimum wage. I have about $70 to my name. You will not be paying for anything. Giancarlo's voice was final, leaving no space for debate. Dante, bring down the security shutters. I want this building sealed. Nobody gets inside unless I say so. Victor, get the other men. I want this block secured in the next 15 minutes. The metal shutters crashed down with a loud, heavy noise, changing the diner from a public place into a private command center. The lights from above cast long shadows, making the diner's old-fashioned decor look serious and menacing. Lyra just stared at Giancarlo, her expression a mix of confusion and new hope. Why are you doing this for me? You have no idea who I am. I am a nobody. Giancarlo was silent for a few seconds, looking at her face. He saw the fear, the pain, and the desperate wish that somebody, for once, would do something instead of just looking away. Because no one else is going to, he said simply. And because men like your landlord count on the fact that women like you have no one to turn to, that way of thinking needs to be corrected. Victor brought a chair over, its legs scraping loudly on the tiled floor. Boss, if her landlord really does have connections, we could be walking into another family's business. This could start a conflict we do not need. Then we will find out whose business it is, Giancarlo said, his eyes never leaving Lyra's. And then we will decide if their connections are more important than doing the right thing. Dante added his thoughts from his post near the entrance, his accent stronger now. This story is going to travel quickly. Everyone in this town will hear that you stepped in for a waitress. People will have questions. They will make assumptions. Let them, Giancarlo replied. His face changed, showing a new kind of resolve. It was the look of a man who had long sought a purpose in acts of violence and had just discovered it in an act of protection. Let them all know that certain lines exist that even I will not allow a man to cross, that my world has rules too. And the first rule is that you do not hunt the weak and believe you can just walk away clean. The kitchen door swung open and an older man in his 60s walked in. He carried an old leather doctor's bag. His hair was a mix of gray and black. His hands were steady, and his eyes showed he had seen too much to be surprised. It was Doc Ferraro. He saw Lyra and his face immediately became serious with professional worry. Christopher, he said with a nod to Giancarlo, before turning all his attention to Lyra with a kindness that only comes from years of experience. I am going to have a look at you, young woman, if you will let me. Then we will figure out our next steps and the treatment you require. Lyra looked over at Giancarlo one last time, checking his face for any sign of a trick or a hidden agenda. She saw only a cold resolve and a deep anger that was for her. She slowly nodded her head. Okay. Please. You have to help me. The pain is getting worse. Giancarlo got up, giving her some room but staying close by. Victor. Dante. Come with me. Let the doctor have some space. They walked to the other side of the diner, their voices low and serious. Giancarlo took out his phone, and the bright screen lit up his face. In the reflection from a nearby napkin holder, he could see Doc Ferraro talking quietly with Lyra. Her answers were too faint to hear. After about 5 minutes, the doctor came over to them, his face grim. What I can do here is not enough. She has internal damage, and it could be very bad. I need to get her to my clinic where I have the right tools and better light. This examination is not enough. Giancarlo's jaw clenched. How bad is it? It is bad enough that if we wait any longer, if we wait for morning, she could have permanent injuries. Dr. Ferraro's tone was professional, but his eyes burned with rage. This was no accident. The bruising pattern shows it was sustained violence, and from what I can see, this is not a new occurrence. She has older wounds, still healing. This man is getting worse. The words landed like stones in Giancarlo's gut. My car is parked in the back. We are leaving now. Dr. Ferraro agreed with a nod. I will see you at my clinic. In 20 minutes. He looked over at Lyra, who stared back at them, her eyes wide with terror. Treat her gently. She is in as much shock as she is in pain. Giancarlo went back to the booth and knelt to meet her gaze. We have to move you to a place with proper medical tools. My car is ready. Can you stand, or should I carry you? I can try. Her voice was thin and broken. I do not want to be a problem. You are not a problem. The strength in his own voice took him by surprise. You are a person who needs assistance. There is a very big difference. Victor went first, pushing open the diner's rear door that opened into the alley. Dante pulled the car up, a dark sedan with blacked-out windows, its engine a low rumble in the 3:45 a.m. quiet. Giancarlo helped Lyra get up, and her sharp breath of pain cut right through him. When her legs started to give way, he acted instantly. He lifted her into his arms, one hand under her legs and the other behind her back, careful to avoid her injuries. I can walk, she protested, her voice weak. Save your energy. His tone was kind, but final. The ride to Dr. Ferraro's clinic was 18 minutes on deserted roads. Lyra was in the back with Giancarlo next to her. Victor was at the wheel and Dante rode in the front, watching their surroundings at all times. She pressed herself against the door at first, trying to keep space between them, but each bump made pain flash across her face. About halfway there, Giancarlo spoke in a low voice. You can lean against me. It will be better than bracing yourself on the door. She paused for a moment, then slowly moved toward him. When the car jolted over a pothole, she grabbed his arm on instinct. Her grip was surprisingly powerful for someone who looked so frail. Sorry, she breathed. Do not say you are sorry. He did not move his arm away, not for asking for help, not for being injured, and certainly not for staying alive. Tears welled up in her eyes. She had been fighting them back since she came into the diner. I thought about not making it earlier tonight, after he was gone. I thought it might be simpler. Giancarlo's voice became hard. That is precisely what monsters like him rely on. That you will be too humiliated or exhausted or hurt to keep going. That you will hold yourself responsible instead of him. I did resist. That is why he got so angry. I tried to stop him and he became furious. He said I was not thankful. He said he could have put me on the street, but he was being kind by letting me stay. Kindness does not have terms like that. Giancarlo stared out at the passing lights. Real kindness does not expect to be repaid with your fear or your pain. The clinic was located in a calm part of town, in a building that looked like a private home. Dr. Ferraro was waiting for them. Lights were on in the rear of the building, and the door was unlocked. He took them to an exam room that was incredibly well stocked. Surgical tools shone under the bright lamps. The room smelled like alcohol and something more. It smelled like safety. Giancarlo placed Lyra on the examination table as carefully as he could. I will be just outside this door. Dr. Ferraro is the best in his field. You will be safe in here. She caught his hand before he could turn to leave. Please do not go far. I will be right on the other side. He squeezed her hand softly. Nobody gets past me. Nobody. The examination lasted for 45 minutes. Giancarlo paced in the small waiting room. Victor and Dante stood guard at the entrance. Every noise that came from the room made him go rigid. He had commanded acts of violence, seen pure brutality, and planned revenge. But hearing Lyra's quiet cries of pain felt different. It felt personal, and it filled him with rage. At last, Dr. Ferraro came out, drying his hands, his face a grim mask. There is internal bleeding, extreme bruising around her pelvis, and a possible tailbone fracture. She will require a lot of rest, medicine, and physical therapy. The wounds are clearly from a violent sexual attack. Did you document it? Giancarlo's voice was frigid. Everything. Photographs. A detailed written report. It is all finished. The doctor looked him in the eye. But she is petrified to file a report. She is sure no one will take her seriously. And from what she said about the landlord's connections, she has good reason to be afraid. Let me handle the landlord. Giancarlo started toward the exam room. Can we move her? It is not safe. She needs to stay put for a minimum of 12 hours. I have a private room upstairs. She can be here as long as she needs. Then we will be here too. Giancarlo turned to Victor. Have the men start working in shifts. No one gets near this building unless I clear them. Inside the exam room, Lyra was on her side, curled up like a child, with a blanket held tight to her chin. Her face was ghost white, her eyes swollen and red. When Giancarlo came in, the look she gave him shattered his carefully built defenses. It was trust. A fragile, desperate trust from a person who had no reason to trust anyone. The doctor says you have to get some rest. His voice was softer than it had been in years. There is a secure room upstairs. You will have a guard. You will not be on your own. Will you stay? The question was a faint whisper. I know this is strange. I know I do not know you, but I am terrified that if I go to sleep, he will be standing there. That this is all just a dream, and I will wake up in that apartment again. Giancarlo dragged a chair over to the table. He sat down with the practiced calm of a man who had waded through much worse things. I will stay, and when you wake, you will be in this room, and you will be safe. I give you my word. Why are you doing all of this? Tears rolled down her face. Men who are like you do not help people who are like me. Men who are like me do not often get a chance to do what is right. He held her gaze. You can call this my chance. She closed her eyes, and sleep finally won its battle against her fear. In a few minutes her breathing became deep and regular. Giancarlo just sat there and watched her. This broken young woman had walked into his diner and opened up a part of him he believed had died a long time ago. It was the instinct to protect, not for money or for influence, but simply to protect someone who was worthy of it. By 6:30 that morning, Giancarlo had placed 8 separate phone calls. Victor stood by the window in Dr. Ferraro's office, looking over handwritten notes. Dante came back from a scouting mission carrying a thick file filled with papers. Upstairs, Lyra was in a deep sleep, aided by medication, finally getting the rest her body needed. Giancarlo laid out the file's contents on the desk. There were pictures, property deeds, credit histories, and background information. The face looking up from the driver's license was completely average. Kenneth Grimes, age 52, was the owner of 4 rental buildings in the area. He had a perfect credit score and no criminal history. From the official records, he seemed like any other small property owner in the city. Victor pointed at the notepad. But there is another side to the story. There always is with men like him. Dante put down a second folder of documents. These were on thinner paper, obviously gathered from unofficial sources. Grimes is not the true owner of those buildings. They are all mortgaged through a shell corporation named Riverside Investments. And Riverside has ties to the Calabrese family. Giancarlo became motionless. The Calabrese organization worked 2 neighborhoods away. They were not a major force, but they were tied in enough to create trouble for their enemies. Their business was extortion, loan sharking, and some minor trafficking. It was never his territory, and never his problem until this moment. How strong is the connection? Giancarlo's voice was empty of emotion. It is strong enough. Dante pushed another paper across the desk. Grimes has been paying the Calabrese family for 3 years. 10% of everything he collects in rent. In return, they supply the force he needs when tenants give him problems. He paid off the police to ignore building code issues. He made difficult complaints just disappear. Victor's voice was blunt. If Lyra had gone to the authorities, they would have filed a report that went nowhere. A couple of detectives on the Calabrese payroll would have buried it. A girl like Lyra, without family or money, stood no chance against a landlord with powerful friends. She would have been dismissed as a problem, maybe even arrested for filing a false claim. Giancarlo held the picture of Grimes, examining his face. The man had weak features and receding hair, the kind of man who could smile at his renters while figuring out how to cheat them. And his attack on Lyra was not the first time. Dante slid 3 other files across the desk. I discovered 2 other reports from the last year. Both were women. Both lived in his buildings, and both cases were dismissed for lack of evidence. One of the victims left the city completely. The other took back her story after someone broke into her apartment and destroyed it. A clear pattern. Giancarlo placed the photograph down with deliberate calm. He targets women who are alone, gives them a cheap place to live, and then uses their situation against them while the Calabrese family gives him protection. Precisely. Victor came to stand by the desk, which creates an issue for us. If we make a move on Grimes, the Calabrese family will take it as a move on them. It could ignite a conflict we are not ready for, or it could be a chance to make a point. Giancarlo leaned back, his fingers forming a steeple. A point that some lines should not be crossed, even by well-connected men. That targeting defenseless women will not be allowed, no matter who is protecting them. Boss, I have to say, the Calabrese family will not interpret it that way. Dante's tone was a warning. They will view it as us ignoring their authority, operating in their space without approval. Angelo Calabrese is not famous for his forgiving personality. Then we will ensure Angelo knows this is not a question of territory. Giancarlo's voice became icy. It is a question of principle. Our world has rules. One of those rules is you do not attack the vulnerable and call it business. The official channels are closed to us. Victor said it as a simple fact. Any charges she files will be erased. Any attorney Lyra brings in will be defeated by Calabrese influence. The justice system is not going to protect her. So we go around the system. Giancarlo rose and walked to the window, looking down at the calm street. We will resolve this the old way. It will be direct, it will be personal, and we will make certain everyone knows the reason it is being done. You intend to target a Calabrese asset. Dante spoke the words carefully, confirming he understood the order. With no permission, with no discussion about territory, you just want to take him. I intend to bring justice to a man who has evaded it for far too long. Giancarlo turned to look at them again. And I intend to show that this has nothing to do with business or control. This is about establishing a boundary. Some actions are unacceptable, no matter whose protection you buy. Victor and Dante shared a look. This was not Giancarlo's usual style. He had built his power on smart calculations, tactical partnerships, and patient deals. To target someone shielded by the Calabrese family without any diplomatic preparation was dangerous, even reckless. What happens to the girl? Victor inquired. If this goes badly, If the Calabrese family decides to hit back, she will become a target. Then we will see that she is protected. Giancarlo's voice permitted no debate. And we will see that Grimes knows what he did to Lyra was not just a crime. It was the final mistake he will ever make. How do you want to handle this? Dante asked, closing the file. With extreme care. Giancarlo went back to his desk and started to arrange the papers in a deliberate sequence. First, we need more information. I want to know Grimes's entire routine, his vulnerabilities, everyone he speaks with, and every place he feels protected. Second, we will contact a neutral third party, someone who can speak with Angelo Calabrese without starting an immediate war. You want to bargain? I want to clarify. There is a distinction. Giancarlo gathered the files of the other women. We will present this to Angelo as an issue that makes his own organization look bad. That allowing a predator to work under his flag is hurting his own name. We will give him a chance to cut ties with Grimes before we act. And if he says no, then we act anyway. Giancarlo's face was set in stone, and we will handle whatever comes next. But I am not letting that man escape what he did to Lyra, simply because he pays the right people. A stillness fell over the office. From the floor above, they could hear Doc Ferraro moving about, checking on his patient. Outside, the morning was beginning. People were starting their commutes. They had no idea that inside this plain building, a choice was being made that would send shockwaves through the city's hidden world. Giancarlo looked at his team. We will be methodical, we will be intelligent, but we will act. No woman should have to endure this because the law failed her and criminals gave her attacker a shield. That stops right now. Victor gave a slow nod. I will call my sources, find someone who can deliver a message to Angelo Calabrese, and I will continue to dig up information on Grimes. Dante took the file. By this time tomorrow, we will know all of his secrets, every weakness he has. Excellent. Giancarlo walked to the door. I am going to see Lyra. When she is awake, she needs to be told that we are taking care of this, that she can stop being afraid. He went up the stairs to the quiet room and gently opened the door. Lyra was still sleeping, her expression finally calm, the marks of stress eased by medicine and deep rest. He sat back down in the chair next to her bed, ready to wait. This was what it meant to protect someone. It was not just about eliminating a danger, but about staying close, about being the barrier between her and the world, about showing that someone cared enough to remain. Lyra opened her eyes at 2:15 in the afternoon. She looked around, confused for a moment before the memories rushed back. The pain was still there, muted by the drugs, but real. She saw Giancarlo in the chair next to her, watching the doorway with the alertness of a man who had made a vow. You are still here. Her voice was scratchy from lack of use. I told you I would be. He stood up and poured her a glass of water from a nearby pitcher, just small sips. The doctor said you would be very dehydrated. Her hands trembled as she took the glass, and she drank 3 small mouthfuls before her stomach tightened. How long was I out? Nearly 8 hours. Your body required the rest. He took the glass from her and set it down. What about the pain? It is better. Not completely gone, but I can handle it. She tried to move and grimaced. Where am I right now? This is Doc Ferraro's clinic. You have been safe, but we have to take you to a more secure location, a place you can recover while we deal with this. A flash of panic crossed her face. My apartment. I have to get my things, my papers, the pictures of my mother. Everything I have is in there. We have already sent a team. Victor gathered all of your personal items, your clothes, your documents, your photographs. They are all being moved to a secure place right now. You will never set foot in that apartment again. But what about the rent? He will come for me. Let him try. Giancarlo's tone was cold. He will not be able to find you, and soon enough, he will have bigger problems to worry about than one missing tenant. Doc Ferraro came in with a wheelchair, his face professionally unreadable. It is time to go, my dear. I have provided Mr. Giancarlo with your care instructions. Pain medicine every 6 hours. You must rest and avoid much movement for the next 72 hours. Where are you taking me? Lyra looked from one man to the other. To a safe place. Giancarlo gently helped her into the chair, his touch surprisingly careful for such a powerful man. A place where my people can watch you, where you can heal without being afraid. The safe house was located on a quiet street in a family neighborhood, a 2-story home with a backyard fence and little view from the road. Nothing about its appearance suggested anything illegal or dangerous. It appeared just like every other suburban home, which made it perfectly invisible, normal, and secure. Victor was waiting for them at the door. The perimeter is tight. We have 4 men on rotation. The windows are reinforced, and we have a rear exit prepared if we have to get her out fast. The inside of the house was furnished with simple but comfortable things. Giancarlo brought Lyra upstairs to a room that was obviously ready for her. There were fresh sheets, gentle lighting, and her own things were already placed on a dresser. The pictures of her mother were arranged neatly on the small table by the bed. Lyra's eyes welled up with tears when she saw them. You got everything. Everything we could locate. Victor was standing in the doorway. If anything is missing, just write it down. We will go back for it. Thank you. She looked at the 3 men who stood around her. These were violent men, yet they treated her with more kindness than she had known in years. I do not get why you are doing all this. What is it you want from me? Giancarlo helped her get comfortable in the bed and pulled up the blanket. We want you to get better, to feel safe, and to stop being terrified every single night. That is the only thing. People never do things for free. Her voice was heavy with past disappointments. Everybody wants something. Then let this be a payment for every time somebody should have helped you, but did not. He started for the door. There is food ready downstairs. Your medicine and directions are on the table. One of my men will be right here outside your room always. If you need anything at all, just... What if he finds me? He will not. The conviction in Giancarlo's voice was absolute. But if he somehow did, he would need to get past 6 armed men to get to you. And he is not that bold. Dante came to the doorway. I have the first shift. The kitchen is full. The doctor left a menu. Simple things. Soup and toast. Nothing that is heavy. Lyra nodded, the tiredness returning even though she had slept for hours. Will you come back? She looked directly at Giancarlo. Or is this the end? I will be back. He stopped in the doorway. This is not the end, Lyra. This is only the start of making sure you will never be scared again. Night covered the safe house. Lyra rested in the bed, the windows open just a little for the cool air, and the quiet sounds of the city came from outside. She could hear the men moving around downstairs, their quiet footsteps and low voices as they changed shifts. At 8 o'clock, Dante delivered soup and crackers. At 10:30, a man she did not know checked the locks. At midnight, she could hear Victor's voice downstairs. Giving model, he gave orders with a quiet authority. Fear should have been her only response. Her mind should have been racing with plans for escape. Every part of this should have screamed wrong. Yet, for the first time in 3 months, a wave of safety washed over her. The realization that someone was watching over her, that help would arrive if she screamed, that she was deemed important enough to be guarded, was a stunning and surreal relief she desperately craved. At 2 in the morning, sleep eluded her despite bone-deep exhaustion, so she moved carefully down the stairs. Each movement sent a flare of pain, but the medicine made it a dull ache. Dante was instantly alert, looking up from his seat at the kitchen table. You need your rest. I cannot seem to sleep. It is too quiet. She rested against the doorway. The sounds of the city are what I am used to. This silence is unnerving. A small smile touched his lips. That is a complaint I did not expect to ever hear. Too much quiet. Is he serious about helping me? The question that had been circling in her thoughts all night finally came out. Or is this just for now, until I become a problem? The boss does not believe in temporary solutions. Dante's voice was full of certainty. When he gives his word, he honors it. It is true even when it comes at a great price, especially then. But why? What does he get out of this? Possibly nothing. That might be the entire reason. Dante rose and went to get her a glass of water. Sometimes doing a good thing is the only payment you need. The boss has not had many opportunities for that. This is one of them. He will not let it go to waste. Lyra took the glass, her eyes fixed on the darkened street outside. A car was stationed by the corner, its two occupants just visible. More guards, more eyes watching. An entire crew of dangerous men was tasked with protecting one shattered waitress. The situation felt unreal, a fantasy she might awaken from at any moment. But the throbbing in her body was undeniable. The pill bottle on the kitchen counter was solid. The sound of Dante's even breaths nearby was constant. This was real. This guardianship, this concern, this bizarre form of rescue from a mafia leader who saw value in her. And for tonight, for this one single precious night, she let herself accept that it might just continue. Giancarlo came back to the house at 7:30 the following morning. He carried a leather briefcase that held information that would alter everything. Lyra was already up, positioned gently in the living room, drinking the tea Dante had made for her. She looked healthier, with some color back in her cheeks, and the haunted expression in her eyes had softened. He placed the briefcase on the coffee table with measured precision. "We have to talk about Kenneth Grimes." Her hand shook, making the teacup rattle. "What is there to say about him? About what we have learned?" Giancarlo unlatched the briefcase and took out the top folder. "For the last 18 hours, my team has been digging for information. What they unearthed is far worse than we imagined." Victor came in from the kitchen holding his own stack of papers. "Boss, the final witness just gave her official account. That brings the total to 7. 7? Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. 7 different women. Giancarlo arranged a series of photographs on the table. Every one of them was a tenant of Grimes from the last 4 years. Everyone was in a weak position, and everyone was his target. He gestured to the first picture. Jessica Ramirez, a 24-year-old single mother. Grimes attacked her 6 months into her lease. She filed a police report. The case was dismissed for a lack of evidence. Lyra gazed at the young woman's face. What became of her? She relocated 3 states from here. Victor's tone was empty of emotion. She was too terrified to remain in the city, so she abandoned her family, her friends, and a job she enjoyed. She just fled. Giancarlo shifted to the next photograph. Emma Pete, a 19-year-old college student, held 2 jobs to pay her tuition. Grimes waited for her to fall behind on the rent before making the same offer he made to you. She said no. He attacked her regardless. Did she tell anyone? She made an attempt. Victor produced a police document. She filed a complaint and provided a thorough testimony. A detective visited her one time for an interview, and that was it. The case just died. No further contact, no actual investigation. It simply vanished from the records because of his ties to the Calabrese family. Lyra's voice was filled with dawning horror. They made it disappear. Precisely. Giancarlo laid out the rest of the pictures. Sarah Kim, 26 years old, an immigrant with poor English skills. Grimes took advantage of that. He threatened her with deportation if she went to the authorities. She took him at his word. She endured 8 months of terror before she finally fled the United States. Dante came in holding another file. Boss, we just got confirmation about the 2 victims from 3 years ago. Their cases matched the pattern exactly. Reports were made, and evidence was gathered. Then, without warning, the cases were shut down. The same detective was assigned to both. Let me take a wild guess. Victor's voice was cynical. Detective Paul Hendris. How did you figure that out? Because Hendris has been taking money from the Calabrese family for 5 years. Dante put the folder on the table. Any official complaint that might affect their business is sent straight to him. He guarantees nothing ever comes of it. He has a perfect history of closing cases without a single arrest. Lyra placed her teacup down with a trembling hand, so it would not have mattered. If I had gone to the police, if I had called them that night, it would have changed nothing. Nothing legal would have come from it. Giancarlo's tone was bleak. The entire system is poisoned, designed to shelter men like Grimes and the syndicates who profit from them. That is the very reason we are avoiding the system completely. He retrieved a much thicker file filled with financial documents. But this is the part that makes it truly sick. Grimes does not only harm his tenants, he makes money from it. Take a look. He laid out a series of bank statements. Every single time a woman makes a complaint and then withdraws it, Grimes gets a wire transfer from Riverside Investments. $5,000 for each incident. They are rewarding him. Lyra's voice was filled with shock. The Calabrizzi family is paying him to hurt women? Not in an obvious way, Victor corrected her. The money is coded as reimbursements for property maintenance, but the timing is too perfect to be anything else. Each time a case is dropped, each time a woman flees, Grimes receives a payment. His predation is incentivized. How many payments? Lyra demanded. 14 transfers in 4 years. Giancarlo's jaw was rigid. 14 women that we can confirm. There could be many more who never came forward, who were too scared, too ashamed, or too certain that no one would help them. The room fell into a heavy silence, the reality of their discovery settling over them like a shroud. This was not a single evil man making a single awful decision. This was methodical, structured, and lucrative. But what about all this proof? Lyra looked at the mess of files on the table. You have everything right here. Financial records, witness accounts, police files. Can you not give this to someone? The FBI or a district attorney. We could, Victor said, his tone implying this was an old debate. But there is a fatal flaw. The bank statements were acquired in a way that makes them inadmissible in any courtroom. The testimonies are from women who are now too frightened to ever appear on a witness stand. And the police reports all officially state that the cases were closed because of insufficient evidence. So, from a legal standpoint, this is all worthless. Giancarlo made it plain. No DA would ever take this case. No judge would permit it. And trying to use the proper channels would just tip off the Calabrizzi family that we were targeting their man. They would lock everything down, frighten the witnesses into silence, and shred all the proof. Then what is the reason for collecting all this? Lyra asked, gesturing to the damning files. Even if we cannot use this, it has a use. Giancarlo's voice turned hard. Just not inside a courtroom. This evidence paints a perfect picture of Kenneth Grimes. It reveals his methods, his system, his shield, and more importantly, it shows us where he is weak. You are going to handle him. It was a statement, not a question. We are going to provide the only kind of justice that works. He looked straight at her. The justice this system is unwilling to give. But before anything happens, I have to know that you grasp the reality of this. Our actions will be outside the law. They will be final and cannot be undone. Will he be stopped? Lyra's voice was firm. Will this prevent other women from suffering what I did? What Jessica and Emma and Sarah and all the others endured? Yes, she said, meeting his gaze. Then I understand, and I want it done. Giancarlo snapped the briefcase shut. Victor, contact our associate. Arrange a meeting with Angelo Calabrizzi for tomorrow. We show him what we have. We give him a chance to cut Grimes loose. If he says no, then we proceed without his approval. Giancarlo rose to his feet. And we send a clear message that protecting monsters has a price, even for a family as powerful as the Calabrizzi organization. Dante collected the documents. What about Detective Hicks? He is involved in this as well. One thing at a time. Giancarlo walked to the door. We deal with Grimes first. After that, we figure out how to handle the corruption that kept him safe. The meeting with Angelo Calabrizzi took place at 10:30 the following morning. The location was neutral ground, a social club in Little Italy that had brokered truces between families for 3 generations. Giancarlo showed up with Victor, leaving Dante to watch over Lyra at the safe house. The briefcase full of evidence lay on the table like a bomb. Angelo Calabrizzi was 68 years old, with silver hair, and he wore the burden of his criminal life with a practiced poise. He sat opposite Giancarlo, flanked by 2 of his men, his face a mask of neutrality. "You asked for this meeting." Angelo's voice was smooth, revealing nothing. "So, I'm listening." Giancarlo unlatched the briefcase and laid the files on the table. "Kenneth Grimes. He is one of your protected assets. He pays your organization for protection. In return, you shield his business dealings." Angelo looked at the papers but did not pick them up. "So what? The deal is business as usual. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me, when his dealings involve the repeated assault of helpless women." Giancarlo slid the witness testimonies across the table. "We have 7 confirmed victims. There are probably others who were too scared to speak out. Your protection has allowed a predator to hunt freely for 4 years." Angelo's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "You come here, to my table, and lecture me on ethics? A man like you? I come here to give you a chance to walk away from something that will ruin your name." Giancarlo's voice was steady. "When this story gets out, and I promise you it will, the Calabrizzi family will be tied to protecting a man who assaults women. Your entire operation will be connected to profiting from violence. That is not the kind of name you want to leave behind. Is that a threat of exposure? I am telling you what is going to happen." Victor spoke for the first time. "We hold the proof. We have the witnesses ready to talk. This can remain private. But if you continue to shield Grimes, we will have to use channels that are not so quiet." Angelo was quiet for a very long time, his eyes scanning the files. Finally, he looked up. "What is it that you want?" "I want you to pull your protection from Grimes." Giancarlo stared right at him, his gaze unwavering. "No payback against any of his victims. No getting in our way when we take care of this ourselves. You want my blessing to make a move on an asset who pays us well. I want you to admit that some money is not worth it. That your family has a code, that you do not shelter predators no matter the price." The air in the room grew heavy. Angelo's men subtly adjusted their positions. Victor was perfectly motionless, his hands in plain sight, but he was prepared. Giancarlo projected an air of pure, unwavering confidence. "At last," Angelo answered. "This is a tough spot you've put me in, Christopher. If I say yes, I appear weak. If I say no, you ruin my name. I lose no matter what. You lose a lot less by picking principle instead of money." Giancarlo closed the briefcase. "And you get something much more important. Respect. The certainty that even in our world, some lines should not be crossed, that the Calabrizzi family does not protect monsters." Angelo watched him for another long moment before giving a slow nod. "Grimes is no longer under our protection. It is done. What you do next is your concern. But his properties belong to Riverside Investments now. That cannot be changed. The properties will be given to his victims." Giancarlo's voice left no room for negotiation. "We start with Lyra Hart. She will receive his main building, the one she lived in. The rest go to the women whose lives he ruined. That is the only way this can end. You are asking for too much. I am asking for justice. They are not the same thing." Angelo sat back in his chair, thinking. Then he put out his hand. "Agreed. The properties will be transferred. Grimes is on his own. But you need to understand something, Christopher. If your solution creates new problems for my family, if it brings the wrong kind of attention our way, we will have this talk again. But it will not be nearly as polite." Giancarlo shook his hand. "I understand. This will be handled quietly, professionally, and it will be final." By 6 o'clock that night, Kenneth Grimes was tied to a chair in a warehouse down by the industrial docks. His hands were zip-tied behind him, and two of Giancarlo's men stood on either side. The room was dark and cold, and it smelled like rust and damp concrete. A single light bulb dangled from the ceiling, creating deep, menacing shadows. Grimes had been taken from his office at 4:30. There was no warning and no reason given. Two men just appeared and led him to a car that was waiting. Now he sat there dripping with sweat despite the chill, his fear pouring off him. Giancarlo walked in at 6:15. Victor was right behind him, holding the briefcase. He took a chair and sat down in front of Grimes, not saying a word for a full minute. He just stared, letting the terror sink in. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Giancarlo finally spoke. Grimes nodded his head frantically. "Everybody knows who you are. Then you also know that I do not make empty promises. I do not bother with symbolic acts. When I do something, it is absolute and for good. Do you get that? I do not understand why you brought me here." Grimes's voice trembled. "I have done nothing to you. My business is not even close to your territory. You do business with Calabrese Protection." Giancarlo's tone was flat. "Or, I should say, you used to. That protection was cancelled 2 hours ago. That means you are sitting in this chair with no one to call, no power to use, and no escape except through me." All the blood left Grimes's face. "I make my payments. I have never been late. Your money is no longer good here." Victor opened the briefcase and started to arrange the files. Model. The Calabrese family does not protect predators, not with evidence this absolute. A look of dawning horror crossed Grimes's face as he stared at the papers. "Those files are sealed police records. You should not have them. We have it all." Giancarlo's voice was ice. 7 different women, 14 separate payments, and 4 years of methodical abuse hidden by your money and corrupt connections. But as of this moment, your protection is gone. "What is it you want?" Grimes asked, his voice breaking. "Is it money? I have assets, real estate. I can give you whatever you ask. I want you to listen very carefully." Giancarlo leaned in. "You have 2 options, and only 2. You will make your choice right here, right now. There will be no negotiation and no stalling." "What are my choices?" "You walk away tonight. You sign over every one of your 4 properties to the people I designate. You empty your bank accounts, leaving half the money with me to be given to your victims. Then you vanish. A new town, a new identity, a new life. And you never think about coming back." "What is the second choice?" A cold, empty smile touched Giancarlo's lips. "You say no, and I show this city what happens to men who use the system to hurt the helpless. They will find parts of your body over the next 3 weeks, and everyone will understand why. They will know that Christopher Giancarlo will not stand for men who prey on those who cannot fight back." Grimes was trembling now, his eyes filling with tears. "I will go. I will sign anything you want. Please, just... I have a family." "So did the women you hurt." Victor's voice was dead flat. "So did Lara Hart before you ruined her life. It is strange that you only care about family now. The documents are ready." Giancarlo produced a thick folder. "You will sign them now." After Victor cut the restraints, Grimes's hands were shaking so much he could barely grip the pen. The first page was a property transfer. The building at 427 Oak Street was to be deeded to Lyra Hart. Complete ownership. No liens. No strings attached. Sign on the bottom line. Initial every page. Giancarlo watched each pen stroke as if he were a judge authorizing a death sentence. Grimes signed, his signature a shaky, almost unreadable scrawl. "The next one." Victor pushed another document across the table. "The building at 815 Maple Avenue, transferred to Jessica Ramirez." "She left," Grimes whispered, his voice cracking. "She moved away a long time ago." "We located her," Giancarlo stated without emotion. "She will soon learn she owns a building valued at $400,000. It is restitution for what you did to her. Sign it." The pen scratched against the paper. Another signature given. Another piece of the empire Grimes had built was handed over to one of the women he had broken. 6 more documents came after that. Each one represented a building changing hands or a bank account being emptied. It was justice served through paperwork instead of a courtroom. When he was done, Grimes had signed away everything he had, except for the suit he was wearing and $20,000 for his escape. Victor gathered the papers, took photos of every signature, and forwarded them to a lawyer who was waiting to file everything that night. By morning, it would all be legal, final, and irreversible. You have 72 hours to get out of this city. Giancarlo stood up, looking down at the destroyed man in the chair. If you are still in town after that, if I hear even a whisper that you tried to contact any of your old tenants, this deal is cancelled, and we move to option 2. I understand. Grimes could hardly form the words. I will be gone tonight. Not quite yet. Giancarlo gave Victor a nod. There is one last thing. Victor took out a phone, started a video recording, and aimed it at Grimes. You are going to give us a statement, a complete confession. Every attack, every threat, every dollar you took to ruin the lives of those women, you will admit to it all on camera. No, Grimes pleaded, shaking his head. That is evidence. They could use that against me. That is the point. Giancarlo's smile was chilling. It is my insurance policy. If you ever violate our terms, if you return, or if you bother any of those women, this video goes to every news channel in the state. It goes to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It will spread across the internet. You will become infamous for all the worst reasons. But you said if I cooperated. I said you could keep your life. This is a condition of that cooperation. Victor held the camera perfectly still. Start talking. The confession took 23 minutes. Grimes recounted every assault in cold detail, naming each woman and admitting to every payment he received. When he finished, he was sobbing uncontrollably, a broken shell of a man who had lost all his power and all his protection. Victor ended the recording and uploaded the file to 3 secure servers. It is done. You can leave now. Just like that, Giancarlo walked to the warehouse exit. You have 72 hours. Make them count. They left Grimes sitting alone in the chair, unbound, surrounded by scattered papers, weeping in the faint light. One of Giancarlo's men would take him to his office for one suitcase and then drop him at the bus depot. By sunrise, Kenneth Grimes would be several states away, starting over with absolutely nothing. Giancarlo arrived back at the safe house around 9:45. Lyra was in the main room. She was reading a book Dante had given her, trying to keep her mind off the agonizing weight. Her head snapped up as he walked in, her face a mixture of terror and hope. It is over, he said, putting his briefcase down. Grimes signed it all. The building is now yours. Full ownership, with no mortgage and no hidden clauses. The paperwork will be officially filed first thing in the morning. Lyra just stared at him. The building, my building, it is your building. It has 4 units. 2 are occupied by good long-term tenants who always pay their rent on time. The 3rd apartment is empty and has already been professionally cleaned. You can move in as soon as you want. The 4th unit is yours to rent out for income or keep for yourself. The choice is yours. I own a building, she whispered, as if testing the reality of the words. I went from being unable to pay my rent to owning an entire building. Justice is not always about revenge, Victor said as he entered behind Giancarlo. Sometimes it is about making things right, about giving back what was taken. Lyra, you deserve to feel safe and secure. Now you will be. What happened to him? Grimes is gone. Giancarlo took a seat opposite her. By tomorrow evening, he will be in a different state with a new identity and a new life. If he has any sense, he will never come back. And if he is not smart, he will learn that our deal only protects him as long as he disappears. The confession we recorded guarantees that, Dante added. One wrong step, and his entire sordid history becomes public knowledge. He will not take that chance. Lyra was silent for a long time, letting it all sink in. Then what about the others? The other women are being notified right now. Victor showed her a list on his phone. Jessica Ramirez is now the owner of a building in the suburbs. Emma Chen received a significant cash payment and the title to a small apartment complex. We are using family contacts to find Sarah Kim, who moved out of the country. We are ensuring every single victim gets what they are owed. This all feels unreal, Lyra said, looking at the three of them. It is very real, Giancarlo's voice was resolute. And it is final. The deeds are being filed as we speak. The money is being transferred by noon tomorrow. It will all be legally registered and beyond challenge. Why? The question that had been tormenting her finally came out. Why do all of this? Why risk a fight with the Calabrese family? Why did you not just keep the properties for yourselves? Because some things are more important than money, Giancarlo said, meeting her gaze. That property was purchased with profits Grimes made from hurting vulnerable people. To sell it would make us part of his crime. Giving it to you and the others is the only right thing to do. Victor stood up. We should let you get some sleep. You have a big day tomorrow. There are property inspections, meetings with lawyers, and the start of planning your new life. What do I owe you for this? Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. For everything you have done, there has to be a cost. There is no cost, Giancarlo said as he walked to the door. You do not owe us a thing. This was about justice. It was not a business deal. But men like you always have a price. Then you can consider me the one exception, he said, pausing in the doorway. Get some rest, Lyra. When you wake up tomorrow, you will be a property owner. You will be safe, as a person who would never fear a landlord again. The door clicked shut, leaving Lyra to face the stunning new reality of her life. News traveled through the streets like a whisper on the wind. The next morning at 10:30, the property deeds were made official at the county records office. But by then, 3 separate people had already phoned the neighborhood diner to ask if the story was true. By noon, when Lyra entered her building for the first time as its legal owner, a small group of people had formed across the street. They watched her with quiet, curious expressions. They first called her the waitress who was hurt, the girl who collapsed right at Giancarlo's table. But by that afternoon, the story had changed. She became the girl Giancarlo protected, the girl for whom he went to war. Inside the Italian bakery on the corner, Mrs. Duca whispered to her clients. Did you hear what he did? He confronted the Calabrese family for that poor young woman. He made Grimes sign away everything he owned. The man is gone now, vanished from town in the dead of night like a common thief. Down at the barber shop, the men argued about what it all meant. It was a dangerous choice to go after Calabrese Holdings, but Giancarlo must have received approval first. There is no chance Angela would allow that otherwise. Over at the laundromat, mothers talked about it as they folded their laundry. Perhaps he is not the monster we all believed. Maybe even he has lines he refuses to cross. Did you hear that he gave the building to her? He did not take it for himself. He simply gave it to her. That evening, when Giancarlo entered the same diner where Lyra had fallen just 3 days before, the atmosphere was different. The room still fell into a familiar silence. The same wave of fear still passed through the crowd. But beneath it all, there was a new feeling. It was curiosity. It was respect. It was the complicated understanding that sometimes a monster will do terrible things to another monster. And sometimes, that changes them into something else entirely. The owner, an older man named Sal, who had owned the diner for 30 years, came to the table with a cup of coffee. This is on the house, Mr. Giancarlo. I also wanted to tell you, what you did for that girl was a good thing. It was the right thing. Giancarlo took the coffee without a word, but Sal kept talking. My own daughter works nights, and she sometimes walks home by herself. To know you will not allow men like Grimes to do business here, that means something to a father. That means something to a family. I did not do it for any praise. I am aware, and that is exactly why it means so much. Sal went back to the counter, but his sentiment lingered in the quiet room. At 11:15 that night, Giancarlo got a call from one of his men. Boss, we have a situation. It is not a problem, really, but it is something you should be aware of. What is the situation? Representatives from 3 businesses on Oak Street came to the warehouse. They are here to show their thanks. They came with gifts, wine, food, and an envelope filled with cash. They are waiting for you outside. Tell them to go home. I have no interest in their gratitude. They will not leave. They said they have to show their appreciation for what you did. They say the neighborhood is safer now, and that their daughters, sisters, and wives can finally rest easier. Giancarlo paused for a moment, then finally said, Fine. 5 minutes. No long speeches. When he showed up at the warehouse, a small group was there waiting, just as he was told. They were shopkeepers, restaurant owners, just regular people who had lived under the thumb of Grimes and the corrupt system that kept him safe. They stood there looking anxious as Giancarlo walked toward them, unsure of how their visit would be taken. An older woman moved forward, carrying a box from a bakery. Mr. Giancarlo, my granddaughter used to work in one of Grimes's buildings. He made unwanted suggestions to her. She chose to quit her job instead of filing a report, because she knew it would do no good. What you did, forcing him to pay and forcing him to leave, you did the one thing the law refused to do. We just wanted you to know that we noticed. And we are grateful. Giancarlo took the box, but his face showed no emotion. This was something the law should have dealt with. The only reason I had to step in is because the system is broken. But you are the one who dealt with it, a younger man said. When the system broke down, you were the one who acted. That means something to the people in this neighborhood. That does not make me a hero. Giancarlo's voice was sharp. I am the same person today that I was yesterday. This changes nothing about me. Perhaps not, the older woman offered a small smile. But it does change how we look at you. There is a clear line between a man who simply takes what he desires and a man who defends those who cannot defend themselves. It is possible to be both. We are starting to understand that now. The group left a few minutes later. He accepted their gifts but kept their appreciation at a distance. But a change had occurred. The neighborhood's view of Christopher Giancarlo had shifted from simple terror to something much deeper. He was still a dangerous man, still someone you did not want to cross. But he was also someone who, in the right situation, might be the only one to act when no one else would. At the safe house, Lyra was watching the local news at 11:30. Her story had reached television, but it was a cleaner, more ambiguous version. Property owner Kenneth Grimes has suddenly left the area after transferring several properties to his former tenants. Sources say this strange deal was arranged by unnamed community advocates. The Calabrese family had no comment on the matter. Community advocates. Lyra nearly smiled at the term. It was certainly one way to describe what Giancarlo had done for her. Dante was sitting in his usual spot near the door. You understand what this is going to do, do you not? You are about to become a local celebrity, the girl that Giancarlo saved. I have no desire to be famous. It is too late for that. The story is already everywhere. People are saying you are brave. They are calling him a hero. This entire affair is turning into a local legend. He is no hero, Lyra said in a low voice. He is a very complicated man who did something good. That does not wipe away the other things he is. No, Dante conceded. But it does not wipe away what he did for you either. Sometimes a person can be two things at once. Sometimes the world is not so simple that you can just attach a label to someone. Through the window, Lyra could see the lights of the city. Out there somewhere, her building was standing, with her name on the ownership papers. Out there somewhere, Grimes was on the run, with nothing left but his own humiliation and fear. Out there somewhere, 6 other women were discovering that they had been given back a part of what had been taken from them. And out there somewhere, Christopher Giancarlo was facing the bizarre new fact that people saw him as more than just a dangerous man. He was seen as complicated. He was seen as human. The town had always whispered about his crimes, his brutality, his influence. But now they were whispering about something new. They whispered about the Mafia boss who defended a waitress, who challenged the Calabrese family on a matter of principle, who gave away entire properties instead of claiming them for himself. The whispers would continue to spread, the story would continue to grow, and life would never return to how it was before. 3 weeks later, Lyra walked without any pain for the first time since that night. The physical therapy that Doc Ferraro set up was helping her. Her internal injuries were mending. The deep bruises had disappeared, fading from dark purple to a pale yellow, and then to nothing at all. Her body was healing, slowly but surely, taking back control from the trauma. She was standing inside the empty third-floor apartment of her building. It was the one Grimes had filled with storage, but it was now completely redone. The walls had fresh paint, the floors were new, and sunlight poured in through sparkling clean windows. This was going to be her home, not rented, not borrowed, but hers. Victor had managed the renovation himself, making sure every detail was exactly as she wanted. The kitchen was full of new appliances. The bathroom was brand new from top to bottom. Her bedroom had a window that faced east, so it would catch the morning sun. It was not a large apartment, but it was perfect. It was a safe place, built from the rubble of a nightmare. The other two apartments were still occupied by their longtime renters, an older couple on the ground floor and a young schoolteacher on the second. Both had always paid their rent on time. Both had lived in quiet fear of Grimes. And both had cried with sheer relief when Lyra told them she was the new building owner. She promised to treat them fairly and to keep the building in good repair. She was figuring out how to be a landlord, learning about property taxes, insurance policies, and city codes. Victor put her in touch with a trustworthy accountant. Dante gave her the number of a handyman she could count on. The building was providing a small but steady income, enough that Lyra did not need to work several jobs just to get by anymore. But she still wanted to work. She needed to. Being still felt like she was just waiting for the next bad thing to happen. At 2:30 that afternoon, she entered a small cafe just 3 blocks away from her building. It was a quiet spot with local customers, owned by a woman named Helena, who knew all about Grimes. He had a history of giving his old tenants jobs without prying, just offering a steady hand. "I need a job." Lyra's voice was firm at the counter. "I need part-time hours with some flexibility. Since I own a building, I have to be around for my tenants, but I also need a routine." Helena watched her, her gaze sharp with understanding. "You're the one they're all whispering about. The girl Giancarlo helped. My name is Lyra Hart. He did help me, but I refuse to let that be my whole story. What I do now is what matters." A smile formed on Helena's face. "How about you start tomorrow? The morning shift runs from 7 to 1. It is a relaxed atmosphere here. We do not get the party crowd, just familiar faces looking for coffee and a chat." "That would be wonderful. Just one rule." Helena's face turned serious. "The moment you feel threatened, the second someone bothers you, you come to me. No hesitation. We take care of our own. Thank you." Lyra's words were thick with emotion. "That means more to me than I can say." Later that night, Giancarlo came to the building, his first visit since he signed it over. She was on the third floor, turning an empty apartment into a place someone could live, putting furniture in place. "This place looks nice." He remained at the entrance, respecting her space. "The upgrades look fantastic." Victor gave me a hand. She placed a lamp on a table and motioned around her. "I never imagined I would have something of my own. And now this whole building is mine. The idea has not sunk in yet. It is your reality, and you have earned it." He took a moment. "I just came to see how you were settling in, to see if there was anything you were missing." I am beginning a new job at Helena's cafe tomorrow, just part-time. It will give me something to do as I learn how to manage this property. That is a smart move. A new routine will keep you grounded. He shifted, the setting sun outlining his face. My protection is still in place, just out of sight. My men are around. You will not notice them, but they are ensuring you are left alone. For how much longer? For as long as it takes. His tone was final. The issue with Grimes is finished, but plenty of men like him are out there. Men who could mistake you for an easy target. They have to understand that you are not. I am not a target. Her gaze locked with his. Never again. I made it through. I am a property owner. I have a job. I have a path forward. That is strength, not weakness. No. The edge of his mouth curved into a small smile. It certainly is not. But having people watch your back does not make you weak. Think of it as a safety net. Why are you still doing all this? The question she had been holding back finally came out. You dealt with Grimes. You fixed the wrong. You could be done with this. Why are you still here? Giancarlo fell silent, his eyes fixed on the street outside. Because my entire life, power was about dominance, about bending the world to my will for my own gain. He faced her again. But keeping you safe, watching you put your life back together, that is power with real substance, the kind that matters. You do not owe me anything, I am aware, but I am choosing this responsibility. He started to leave. This one choice, the decision to shield someone instead of using them, has more meaning than anything I have done in 10 years. Can you tell me what happened to them? Lyra's words made him pause. The others, Jessica and Emma, and Sarah. Are they all right? Jessica turned her building into a sanctuary for mothers raising children alone. Emma graduated from college and is sending out law school applications. Sarah came back from her trip abroad last week, and she wept for a full hour after hearing about the building. A clear sense of pride was in his tone. They are all starting over, all finding their way, and it is all because of you. Because the proper channels did not work and a person had to step up. He stopped in the doorway. You should get some sleep. Tomorrow is a fresh start, your first shift in a new life where fear is not in charge. When he was gone, Lyra looked out her window at the street below. The lights of the city began to flicker on, bathing the area in a gentle light. It was her area now, her property, her sanctuary, her destiny. Her mind went back to that diner, to the agony, the terror, the frantic search for anyone who looked strong enough to make it stop. The sentence she had spoken that changed everything. I cannot close my legs. The pain is too much. But now she could move without agony, hold a job without terror, could rest without dreaming of the past, could be a homeowner, create a future, and focus on what was ahead instead of what was behind. The crime boss, who first appeared as one more danger, had become her rescue. Not for reasons of goodness, but because he took action at a critical moment, because he discovered a reason to shield someone, because he showed that even threatening men have limits, can value integrity over money, and can provide justice where institutions could not. The city would continue to murmur, to pass on the tale, to turn her reality into a myth. And Lyra would continue her life, her work, her growth. She was not the girl who crumpled in agony anymore. She was not the person who needed a hero. She was simply Lyra Hart, a building owner, a person who endured, a woman who discovered that rescue can appear from the most surprising sources, brought by complex individuals who were not saints or sinners, but simply people, making choices and trying to be better. And now and then, that is all that is needed. I am so grateful you followed this amazing story all the way through with me. If this tale resonated with you, you will not believe what I have for you next. The next one is even more moving and uplifting than you can fathom. So please, stay right here. Tap the video that is on your screen this very moment to jump into another incredible narrative that is guaranteed to change your perspective. Believe me, It is worth your time. This content was researched, carefully crafted, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaning and real-life lessons.